Hello, welcome back to Pin My Podfic. This is a reading of After the Fall by Innocent with one underscore reader. This is chapter 7, part 1 and part 2, Steps Beyond the Storm. Now, this one also only has 3 parts, so I'll be posting all 3 parts probably in the same day, I think, if I remember. So yeah, if there's anything in the background, it's my neighbors' babies, or my neighbors, either my neighbors, like from downstairs neighbor's baby, or my upstairs neighbor's dog. Seriously, both of my upstairs neighbors have dogs. How many dogs are in my neighborhood? I don't know. Anyways, now let's get on with the chapter. Chapter 7, Steps Beyond the Storm, Part 1. The Batmobile's engine purred low, filling the heavy silence that hung between the 3 young passengers as they traveled down the empty highway. Its headlights cut through the gloom in steady beams, illuminating rusted road signs and stretches of patched asphalt. Twisted trees lined the roadside, casting claw-like shadows across the ground. Occasionally, a glint of metal flashed in the distance. Abandoned cars covered in dust and leaves, or the silhouette of a lone bridge rising against the horizon. The smell of heat-rubbed rubber mixed with the cold air slipping in through small gaps, carrying a faint scent of damp earth and far-off smoke. Gotham was now behind them, wrapped in its familiar shadows. The road ahead stretched out like both a promise and a warning. There were no more alien ships in the skies, no battle cries echoing between buildings, but there weren't many other people either. Cities sat in a state of shock, civilizations still standing, but still recovering from an unbearable trauma. Dick Grayson kept his eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel. He didn't need to speak for the others to understand the weight he carried with every passing mile. The fat emblem on the dashboard seemed to remind him of those missing. Bruce, Diana, Clark, all of them. In the passenger seat, Wally West rested his elbows on the door and gazed out out the window, his face lit in cold light from the console. He tried without much success to keep the mood light. Man, seriously, you still haven't explained why you're the one driving, Wally said, turning from the window to look at his friends. I'm literally faster than this car. Dick raised an eyebrow, keeping his focus on the road. Because for starters, it's called the Batmobile, not the Flashmobile. It could be. I'd give it a way better name, something like Lightning Wheels. Wally grinned and pleased with himself. And that's exactly why you're not driving, Dick replied, a faint, tired smile tugging at his lips. Oh, come on. You're not even old enough for this. And you've got super speed and you're still stuck in the passenger seat. I'd say we're even. Wally was still laughing at the lightning wheels joke when Midoriya in the back seat let out a quiet chuckle. That kinda suits you, he said without thinking. Wally turned back to him with a satisfied grin. See, Dick, the rookie approves. Midoriya looked away to the window, still smiling, though the thought came suddenly. They talk like old friends, even after everything they've lost. Dick shook his head. I'm not looking for approval. I'm looking to get us there alive and without drawing attention. The serious tone made Midoriya straighten up slightly. Settling back into watching the world outside. But with a strange sense, he was, little by little, becoming part of their rhythm. The car felt silent again. Empty roads, sense of the world, a crashed alien ship. Feels like a bad B movie. Wally murmured with a faint smile, though it faded quickly, as if even he felt guilty for trying to lighten the mood. In the back, Midoriya's eyes stayed fixed on the passing scenery, curious, cautious. Every small town, every bridge, every ruin they passed was another piece of this new world he was starting to understand. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He was still taking it all in. How long until we reach Star City? He asked. He finally asked. About 2 days. If we keep the route clear, we're still in New Jersey. We've got a few thousand miles before we hit Washington State. Dick replied without taking his eyes off the road. We're crossing the country after all. Midoriya nodded, staring ahead. He had never crossed such a long distance in a vehicle like this, especially not in a world so different from his own. The silence returned, thick as fog. Up a few minutes later, Wally tried again. You like Star City? Well, it was beautiful. Lots of light, lots of colors. He paused, sighing. Roy, the guy we're meeting, he's kind of rough, but he's got a good heart. Midoriya smiled faintly, but didn't reply. The name Roy was only familiar because they mentioned him before, and because they've spoken over a video call. Still, the way Wally and Dick and Wally talked about him made it clear he mattered. He's like you? Midoriya asked after a moment. How do you mean? Dick glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Uh, sidekick? Midoriya hesitated on the word, remembering not everyone took it to it kindly. Wally chuckled briefly from the nostalgia and humor. Yeah, he was speedy, Kid Archer with a massive inferiority complex, but good, really good. Now, he's Red Arrow. Dick added with a faint smile. The name lingered in the air until Midoriya said softly, the heroes in this world, you grew up together, fought together, and lost together. Dick finished quietly, as the Batmobile sped through the deserted road. The silence that followed stretched on. Dusk painted the sky in orange and purple. A shadow grew long over the asphalt and ruins. And Star City? Midori asked, as if to steer them away from the heaviness. Was it badly damaged? Wally's tone was serious. Roy says he held out better than most. He managed to organize resistance, protect the civilians, but he made a vague gesture. Nothing came through untouched. Midoriya's fingers curled slightly into the fabric of the clothes he'd chosen back in the Batcave. Still getting used to wearing something other than a hospital gown or his hero uniform. He didn't know exactly what to expect, but a familiar feeling stirred his chest. The need to help. When we find Roy, what will we do? He asked, more to himself than to them. See how we can help, Dick answered, voice steady. Protect what's left, bring back whoever's still out there, and make sure it doesn't happen again. Wally added, eyes on the horizon. The Batmobile pushed forward, swallowed by the road, while the sun sank behind them, leaving only the scars of the world they were struggling to rebuild. The fuel gauge was dangerously close to empty when Dick spotted a lonely gas station on the side of the road, just after they crossed the bridge marking the Pennsylvania border. The sign creaked in the wind, its paint faded from decades of wear. Time to refuel, Dick said, staring towards the pump farthest from the entrance. The station's owner, a middle-aged man in a worn baseball cap and plaid shirt, stepped out of the shop, wiping his hands on a rag. His eyes widened the moment he recognized the car and the two costumed passengers. I, I know you, Robin and Kid Flash, right? Wally grinned, pulling back his hood. That's us, still on the job. You saved the world. After everything, I never thought I'd see one of you again. Thank you. Really? Dick gave a respectful nod, skipping speeches. There's still a lot of work to do. Midoriya watched in silence, gaze shifting between the man and the two heroes, taking in the ease with which they handled moments like this. I can't pay you back, the attendant said, but the gas is on the house. No need, Dick replied. Keep it for someone who needs it more. The man smiled stubbornly. Then at least take some of hot coffee and snacks for the road. You'll need them. Wally didn't argue this time. Now that will take. A few minutes later, with a tank full and 3 steaming cups in hand, they climbed back into the Batmobile. As the door shut, Midoriya murmured, almost to himself, in my world, heroes rarely stop for coffee with the people they saved. Dick started the engine, meeting his eyes in the rear view. Then maybe it's time to change that here too. The deep growl of the engine filled the air again as they pulled away, carrying more than just fuel with them. They carried a reminder why they kept going. Now with finishing with part 1, this is part 2, chapter 7, Steps Beyond the Storm. After leaving the gas station, the Batmobile pushed on along the interstate, but the trip wasn't as smooth as Dick had hoped. Entire stretches of highway were blocked by debris, abandoned, crumpled car shells, twisted metal signs, even fallen utility poles still waiting to be repaired. More than once, Dick had to slow down and veer off onto side roads, winding their way through narrow, dimly lit streets to get around the blockages. Once a convoy of rescue trucks was partially blocking the way as crews worked to clear warped beams from the asphalt. The team leader spotted Robin and Kid Flash, gave them a grateful nod, and opened up a makeshift lane so they could pass. Crossing through Pennsylvania, they stopped at a small roadside diner where the smell of coffee and fresh baked pie almost cut through the tension of the journey. The waitress, recognizing Robin and Kid Flash, hesitated for a moment before smiling and quietly thanking them for what they've done. Wally, a little embarrassed, cracked a joke about preferring coffee to applause, while Midoriya curiously observed how the two heroes handled that kind of attention. Farther ahead, a partially collapsed bridge in Ohio forced Dick to leave the main highway. The detour took them onto dirt roads where the Batmobile roared past open fields and weathered bars. They passed families hauling furniture and supplies in a pickup truck, and some stopping to watch the black car go by like they'd just seen an apparition. That night, they stopped to refuel at a small station lit only by buzzing fluorescent bulbs. After a moment's hesitation, the attendant recognized Robin and Kid Flash, thanking them for still being out here. Wally replied with a tired smile and quick quip, while Midoriya took it all in, absorbing every detail. The country was still breathtaking, but with effort, every mile made it clear that the road to Start City would be long and marked by scars. The first streets of Star City emerged on the horizon, like wounds in the landscape. The Batmobile rolled forward slowly, swerving around the abandoned cars, down the poles and fresh craters in the pavement that hinted at recent explosions. Broken glass twinkled in the wind, and bent traffic signs hung like even the metal itself had grown weary. A few 3 and 4 story buildings still stood, their facades scarred with their facades scarred with soot and windows bored over with rough planks. On the sidewalk, small groups of survivors carried boxes or pushed carts, some pausing to glance at the black car as it passed. Now and then, someone recognized Robin and Kid Flash inside, giving a hesitant wave, not with excitement, but with a mix of hope and doubt. The old Batmobile slowed as they reached Star City's limits. The streets were quieter than they should have been for a city this size. The asphalt bore fresh marks, craters, tracks of destruction, and hastily abandoned barricades. Even with the invasion order, the trauma was stamped into every corner. Dick Grayson navigated carefully through the wreckage. The car, while ordinary enough by Wayne's standards, stood out against the near-apocalyptic backdrop. There was no traffic, no sirens, only scattered grounds of civilians tending to the injured, moving supplies, or watching warily for any unusual movements. Royce said he was keeping a relief post downtown. Dick said, checking the small GPS, that surprisingly was still picking up red arrow signal. Wally, fidgeting in the passenger seat, looked at the few faces on the street. They made it, he murmured with some relief. At least some of them. Wally fidgeted in the passenger seat, looked at the few faces on the street. Rick. From the back seat, Midoriya soaked in every detail. The similarities and differences to the cities of his own world stood out starkly. The way people clung to order and chaos, how the sight of heroes carried a quiet hope, and how destruction still marked everything. You think he's okay? He asked, leaning forward between the seats. Roy? Wally grinned despite his nerves. He's tough. Minutes later, Dick pulled the Batmobile up in front of a partially destroyed building. Half-destroyed building. The public building, the City Hall sign hanging by a single wire. And at the entrance, volunteers and a few armed civilians kept watch, while a makeshift resistance symbol, a red bow painted on a wooden board, made it clear who was in charge. This is it, Dick confirmed, cutting the engine. As they parked, the silence broke with the metallic click of weapons being readied. From behind the improvised barricades, figures emerged, some wearing patched-up vests, others in mismatched local security uniforms. Hard stares and tight fingers on triggers followed the trio as they stepped out of the car. A cold wind swept down the street, tugging at a makeshift flag bearing the red bow symbol. But none of the guards lowered their defensive stance. Dick took a step forward, keeping his cape tucked in and his hands visible, while he raised his in a peaceable gesture, while Midoriya stayed quiet, tense, ready to move if things went south. The guards exchanged glances, sizing them up as if weighing allies and threats at the same time. The weight of the moment wasn't just in the weapons. It was in the fact that, in times like these, when the arrival of heroes had to be verified carefully, Wally took another step forward, Hands still up. Easy. We're friends. We're here to see Red Arrow. One of the guards, a middle-aged man with a weary look, narrowed his eyes, finally recognizing Wally and Dick after a few seconds. Kid Flash. Robin, he muttered, lowering his weapon slightly. He's inside, doing as well as he can. And that was the end of part 1 and 2 of chapter 7, steps beyond the storm. Steps beyond the storm. Yes. Anyways, from After the Fall by Innocent with one underscore reader. I was like reading this post-apocalyptic DCU, and also listening to a video called an hour-long video actually called "How Gen Z Will Change Politics Forever." It's kind of ironic, but not exactly in the way you'd think. But yeah, anyways, check them out and everything. Link in the description. I'll make sure they're tagged, and well, I don't know how I'll tag them on this. I don't have their YouTube stuff or anything, but I'm sure they'll see. I'm pretty sure they'll see this. I'm pretty sure they've at least watched one of my videos or something or their stuff. And yeah, like and subscribe or whatever. I don't know. As you all know, I do this for pleasure, not for my own pleasure, really, actually. Since I can later on listen to it myself, since sometimes I forget stuff when I do some commentary like this. So yeah, bye and see you in the next one.